Thank you for joining us for an episode of our Notebook Deep Dive podcast. These podcasts are based on either books, essays, or lectures I have written or given over the last 3 decades.
Okay, have you ever had that feeling like someone's pointing the finger at you, blaming you, and you're just standing there thinking, wait a minute, this is not on me?
Yeah, or how about like when someone says something and you're suddenly hit with this wave of shame that
Yeah.
seemingly came out of nowhere? You know, those times when something just feels off.
It's like, where did that even come from? We've all been there.
Definitely. And it might surprise you how often that points to, well, something interesting happening psychologically. I'm talking about projection, psychological projection. We hear the term, but digging deeper, I think, can really unlock a lot in how we understand interactions.
It's true. This defense mechanism, it's more common than we realize. And when it's misunderstood, it just creates so much static, unnecessary static in our relationships. For this deep dive, we're really going in deep on this one. We're diving into Joseph Sapp's work.
Projection book project.
Projection book project. Exactly. And we've got a couple of other pieces we're going to weave in there to kind of give us like a really well-rounded view of this. And Sapp's background, I mean, wow, he's been a trial lawyer, a clinical hypnotherapist, and an expert in, get this, social engineering.
I mean, that's someone who's really seen it all, right?
Yeah.
Human behavior, the inner workings, from so many different angles.
So many angles, exactly. Our goal today is straightforward, but it's pretty powerful. We want to equip you, give you a shortcut to truly grasp projection, how it operates, its significance in our lives. But the biggest takeaway is how to spot it, not just in others, but this is the crucial part, within yourself too. Ultimately, we're hoping for more clarity, more peace as we navigate the sometimes really murky waters of, well, just being human and interacting with each other.
For sure. And a good starting point for this journey is getting the basics right. So if you look at Sapp's work, he basically says psychological projection happens when someone unconsciously puts their unwanted thoughts, feelings, motivations, or even impulses onto someone else.
Unconsciously. That's a real key word there, isn't it? This isn't someone deliberately trying to mislead you or shift blame. It's like under the surface, below their awareness, almost like their internal weather system is kind of projecting onto your forecast.
Exactly. That's the dividing line between this and, just straight up lying or choosing to shift blame.
Mm-hmm.
Those involve intention, projection. It's more instinctive, automatic even.
It's fascinating to think about where this idea even comes from. Sapp mentions Freud, Sigmund Freud, the guy who really gave this a name back in the early 1900s. At first, it was all about those unacceptable desires, the things we'd rather not admit to ourselves, right?
Right, and Freud, he saw it as the ego. That part of us that wants to feel good about ourselves, trying to keep things balanced morally and psychologically. It's like the unconscious is whispering, nope, not me. Can't be me feeling this. Must be you.
Right. And then Carl Jung, Freud's student, comes along. He adds this layer with the shadow self, right? These are the parts we kind of like shove down to the basement of our minds, the stuff we don't want to deal with.
Exactly. Jung argued our shadow. It doesn't just disappear. It finds a way to surface, often through how we see others. So what we reject in ourselves, we might start seeing really strongly in the people around us. Almost like our inner not me is being projected out there onto other people.
Okay, let's make this real. What does this look like, this projection in everyday life? Sapp has some examples that really hit home.
He does. Imagine a boss who's always on your back about, say, reliability. A few minutes late, miss a small deadline, and they're all over you. But this is the same boss who consistently misses important meetings or forgets, like, really crucial details. Textbook projection right there.
It's like they're trying to take that feeling of being unreliable, and just kind of put it on someone else. Or what about the friend who's constantly giving you that look, that side eye, and going on about how judgmental you are? But they're the ones dissecting everyone in the room.
Perfect example. Their own tendency to judge, it's projected onto you. It's almost like a way of dodging that mirror, right? If you're busy being judgmental, they don't have to look at themselves.
In the online world, prime real estate for this, Sapp mentions someone who's constantly like ranting, about how fake everyone on social media is. But guess what? Turns out they bought like a ton of followers.
It's this distorted reflection, as Sapp puts it. Their own actions, their insecurities, they get twisted and then reflected back onto others. The unconscious logic is, if I'm loud enough about calling out fakeness in you, I don't have to consider it in myself.
It's a fascinating point Sapp makes. Projection and accusation, they're not the same thing. They're related but not identical, right?
Definitely. Like every projection will have an accusation in there somewhere, but not every accusation is a projection. People do things that warrant criticism.
Yeah.
Sometimes people deserve to be called out.
So how do we differentiate? What are the signs Sapp gives us to separate a real accusation from, psychological projection?
So with projection, there's this intensity. It's like it's over the top almost. It's a pattern. It shows up across situations, across relationships. And the tone, there's this like undercurrent of fear in it, sometimes disgust, with this really rigid self-righteousness. And crucially, there's often no real evidence, like hard, objective proof. Ultimately, projection tells us more about the person making the accusation than about the person they're pointing at.
Okay, that makes sense. A regular accusation, Sapp says, it's usually rooted in things you can observe, specific events. Emotion might be there, but there might also be facts. And it doesn't automatically tell you something about the accuser. And, sometimes an accusation can be constructive, especially if it's done with a sense of, accountability and aiming for positive change.
For sure. Sapp suggests if you're on the receiving end of accusations that feel off, oddly personal, and just don't quite fit, think about projection. He asks this really insightful question. What would someone have to be feeling inside for this specific accusation to be their go-to, their first move? That feeling, that's often the key to understanding what's really going on.
So it's not just the words, it's the energy behind them. Sapp talks about this emotional cocktail, the fuel for projection. What's in that mix exactly?
He says it's usually a blend of insecurity, some kind of desire they're not acknowledging, fear of judgment, and then this thing he calls mental gymnastics, the mental hoops we jump through to make the projection seem real.
Okay, let's break that down. Insecurity, how does that factor in?
Well, imagine someone who is deep down unsure of their abilities, their worth. They might project arrogance or a need for constant validation onto someone else. It's a way to deflect their own feelings of inadequacy, right? It's like, I don't feel good enough, so I'm going to accuse you of being overconfident or attention-seeking, and that'll make me feel a little better.
An unacknowledged desire.
That's when we have these yearnings, these impulses we can't admit to, even to ourselves. They clash with our image, our values, so we project the negative version of that desire onto someone else. Like if I secretly crave wealth and status, I might be super quick to label others as greedy or shallow. I'm pushing that uncomfortable desire outwards.
Hey, fear of judgment, that seems pretty self-explanatory here.
Right. If I'm terrified that others will see me negatively, let's say as dishonest, I might just start calling everyone else a liar. It's a defense. I'm trying to redirect that judgment away from myself.
And mental gymnastics, that sounds like the active work our minds do to keep the projection going.
Exactly. We have this feeling, a thought, that clashes with how we see ourselves, and our minds just go into overdrive, often unconsciously, to reassign it. That's not my unkind thought, that's just them being arrogant. It's the ego, trying to maintain its preferred narrative about who we are.
But Sapp points out there's a danger here, doesn't he? Like the more someone relies on this, the more they risk losing touch with what's real.
It's true. Over time, separating your internal conflicts from the outside world, your feelings from someone else's traits, it gets harder. It can really damage relationships and, frankly, your well-being because you're living in this distorted version of reality.
So we're seeing what projection is, how it works. Now let's go deeper. What are its psychological roots, according to Sapp and those key thinkers he references?
Sapp takes us back to Freud, the OG of projection, right? He saw it as a defense mechanism, a way to cope with those desires, those impulses that create conflict inside because they clash with our sense of self, our morals. The mind says, too much stress, got to protect us, and pushes these unwanted feelings down, out of sight, and then throws them onto others. Nope, not mine, they're yours. Keeps that illusion of being good, morally sound intact.
And Jung builds on this with the shadow. How did he see projection playing into this?
Jung viewed the shadow as this, storehouse of everything we repress, stuff we don't own, not just bad stuff, even good qualities we haven't fully integrated. He said, whatever we push down to that unconscious basement, it doesn't just vanish, it comes out in how we see others. So for Jung, projection, it wasn't just camouflage, it was an opportunity, a mirror showing us those unacknowledged parts of ourselves.
I love this analogy Sapp uses. He compares our mind to a house, right? The conscious mind is the living room, all neat and tidy, and the unconscious is the basement, all cluttered, full of boxes labeled, not me.
Perfect imagery.
Oh.
And defense mechanisms, projection included, they're like the mind's bouncer. Something from the basement tries to sneak up, disrupt the living room, and bam, door slams shut. They're emergency strategies, often from childhood, to deal with big, tough emotions.
So, like, if a kid's always taught that anger is bad, they might grow up projecting that anger onto everyone else, always seeing others as angry, to maintain their own self-image as calm and good. And that sticks with them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And as adults, the projections get fancier, more subtle, but the core mechanism, it's the same. It's crucial to understand this can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. People who project, they start looking to proof, anything to back up their projection, even twisting neutral things to fit their narrative.
What's really interesting is that Sapp points out this isn't new. It's not some recent discovery. This projection thing, it's been around even before Freud and Jung.
Yeah, it's a theme that pops up everywhere. Literature, mythology, religion, going way back. Think Narcissus, right? Obsessed with his own reflection, couldn't see anything else. Shakespeare. His characters are constantly accusing others of the very flaws they have. Even the Bible, that whole thing about the beam in your own eye before pointing out the speck in your brother's, it's all about projection.
And now even neuroscience is getting involved, right? Like they're seeing what happens in the brain when we project.
Absolutely. Brain imaging studies, they're showing activity in specific areas, the prefrontal cortex, that's about self-reflection, and the amygdala, which handles emotions and threats, all lighting up when people are projecting. It seems like the more internal conflict we have, the more we repress, the easier it is to misinterpret our feelings as someone else's. It's like a neurological echo of those early psychological insights. And the scans, they often show more activity in areas linked to the projector's own feelings, backing up the idea that this is all internal.
This connection Sapp makes between projection and cognitive dissonance, it's so interesting. That feeling when our beliefs clash or actions don't match our values, it's uncomfortable. How does projection help us cope with that?
He compares it to trying to walk both north and south at the same time, which is impossible, obviously. That feeling of being pulled in opposite directions, that's cognitive dissonance. It's what happens when our self-image clashes with our actual thoughts, beliefs, behaviors. And our brains hate this.
So instead of doing the harder work, like actually changing our beliefs or behaviors to match up, projection offers a quick but not so healthy way out.
Exactly. It's rewriting the story, but in a kind of warped way. It's not me being unkind, it's them being arrogant. Instant fix for the discomfort, but not a real solution. It's like that faulty circuit breaker that redirects the overload, but doesn't fix the problem.
Sapp calls it a quick fix, and he's right. But there are consequences, right? Long-term costs.
Big time. It might make the ego happy in the short term, but it blocks real self-awareness, genuine connection with others, and growth. You end up with this distorted view of reality, where everything is warped by your own unresolved stuff.
The case examples Sapp gives really bring this home, like the righteous boss, Greg.
Or Greg sees himself as this amazing leader, super supportive. Then Maya, his junior associate, starts getting recognized for her good work, and he just flips, starts micromanaging her, accusing her of not being a team player. The dissonance. He wants to see himself as confident and supportive, but he's actually threatened by her success. So he projects it's her that's the problem, not him facing his own insecurity, maybe even a bit of envy.
And then there's Elena, the co-parent, going through a tough custody battle.
Oh, Elena. Absolutely convinced her ex is manipulating their daughter against her, constant accusations. But as Sapp highlights, there are signs that she's the one being manipulative, the dissonance. She can't reconcile being a loving mom with her own potentially harmful actions. So project it onto the ex, protects her ego, justifies her behavior.
And finally, Sam, the chill friend who really hates being called out.
Sam, Mr. Easygoing, drama-free. But when his friends gently point out his passive-aggressive tendencies, he loses it. They're the toxic ones, he says, and starts distancing himself. Admitting he might be avoiding conflict or being subtly aggressive, that shatters his chill image, so he projects it all onto them.
These examples really show how, while projection offers that band-aid solution for discomfort, it ultimately sabotages self-awareness and real, honest relationships. Sapp really emphasizes how prevalent projection is, right? It's not some rare psychological quirk.
No, not at all. He even twists that old saying. It's like, if everyone you meet seems shady, dishonest, selfish, or shallow, maybe it's the lens you're looking through. We all do it, and once you're aware of it, you see it everywhere.
And it's not just certain personality types, right? It's not just people who are, obviously troubled.
No, it's a human thing. Sapp describes everyday conversations as this, like hidden competition of blame. Everyone's projecting, trying to protect their ego, avoid vulnerability or shame, often without even realizing it.
Like, he gives examples. Someone who says, ugh, I hate fake people. What's going on there?
Sapp says that kind of strong, sweeping statement is often code for, I'm terrified of being seen as fake, so I'm attacking it in others before anyone can even think it about me. It's preemptive projection, getting ahead of their fear.
What about, why are you so defensive? And it's said by someone who's clearly being defensive themselves.
Classic projection. It's like they're trying to get rid of their own defensiveness by accusing you of it. It's like these statements are verbal ink blots, telling us more about the speaker's emotions than about the other person's behavior. Sapp also points out things like gossip, sarcasm, even those backhanded compliments can sometimes be sneaky forms of projection.
And then he talks about specific areas where projection is really common. Given his background, let's start with the legal world. What happens there?
It's fascinating. In legal situations, Sapp sees this pattern where one side accuses the other of doing the very thing they're involved in. Like, imagine a business partner who's caught embezzling, suddenly accusing their partner of being dishonest with money. In law, projection can be a tactic, a way to shift blame, but it can also be this unconscious, compulsive thing driven by guilt or shame.
What about politics? It seems like projection's central.
Oh, absolutely. Sapp even jokes that the projection possum should be the mascot of politics. We see it constantly. Leaders accusing their opponents of being authoritarian while they consolidate their own power, or pointing fingers at scandals while they're knee-deep in their own. It's all about creating that us versus them dynamic. Project the bad stuff onto the other, and it's a very effective, if kind of manipulative, strategy.
And then there's religion and spirituality, which can be a bit of a sensitive topic.
Right. Sapp makes this point that while religion and spirituality are often about looking inward, being humble, when people, especially leaders, haven't dealt with their own shadow, they can project evil outward onto others. This can lead to all sorts of problems: scapegoating, fear-mongering, attacking those who are different. He warns about the danger of rigid beliefs mixed with power, because they can really amplify these projections with potentially harmful results.
And then there's our relationships, the close ones.
Oh yeah, Sapp calls it the interpersonal war zone. Romantic relationships, especially because there's so much intimacy and vulnerability, they become breeding grounds for projection. Jealousy disguised as concern, control masked as setting boundaries, insecurity coming out as harsh criticism. One really damaging one he talks about is when someone who's emotionally unavailable accuses their partner of being distant, when it's actually the partner who wants more connection.
He makes an interesting observation about people who act really self-righteous.
He says, the louder and more insistent someone is about their own moral superiority, the more likely it is they're hiding something. It's like that self-righteousness is a shield, deflecting attention from their own flaws, inconsistencies, past behaviors. It prevents both you and them from looking too closely.
Okay, so we're getting pretty good at recognizing this. Now for the practical stuff. How do we spot it in real time? Sapp gives us these tells, tics, and tropes. Let's get into those.
So start with nonverbals, body language. Exaggerated gestures, pointing fingers that can mirror the psychological finger pointing. Sudden shifts in posture, like leaning in aggressively and then back, that can show the tension between projecting and their own shame or guilt. Asymmetrical expressions, where one side of the face is showing a different emotion, that can hint at a half-truth. And then incongruent affect, when the tone of voice and the facial expression don't match, that's a classic sign that something's off.
And then there are the linguistic fingerprints, right? The patterns in how they speak.
Definitely. One big one is those sweeping statements with no evidence. Everyone knows you're manipulative, that kind of thing. Another is repeating emotionally charged words, like they're trying to convince themselves as much as you. But the most revealing, Sapp says, is how they use pronouns.
Pronouns, how does that connect to projection?
It goes back to what Sapp calls the third-person confession. They start talking about someone else. He's so controlling, she can't be trusted. But as they go on, describing this other person, it starts sounding awfully familiar. Because unconsciously, they're describing themselves.
He actually gives a formula for this.
He does. First, the accusation. They say something negative about someone else. Second, they get really descriptive, using strong emotional language. Third, they might offer their expert analysis of the other person's motives. And finally, unintentionally, their description ends up fitting them much better than the person they're supposedly talking about.
So, someone who says, I can't stand it when people expect you to read their minds. They never just say what they want, and then they get mad when you don't know. They might actually be describing their own passive communication style and how they get upset when others don't pick up on their unspoken needs.
Exactly. They're projecting those parts of themselves they don't want to own, but those parts still want out, so they leak through in this disguised way. Sapp says, pay attention to those really intense, detailed descriptions of others. especially if they seem oddly fluent in describing someone they dislike. It's often a reflection of their own inner stuff.
He mentions this tremble in the force, right? Like a change in the atmosphere right before the projection happens. What are the signs of that?
It's this subtle shift, you can almost feel it. It's when the energy in the room changes, becomes charged. Projection often comes when someone feels threatened. They feel accused, exposed, or you've hit a nerve, or maybe some old shame is resurfacing. It builds up. And right before it erupts, you might see it. Their voice changes, gets louder, strained. They become more rigid, defensive. Their eye contact, it might get intense, or they avoid it. And when the accusation comes, it's personal, out of proportion. So yeah, that change in the air, that's often your cue that someone's about to offload their baggage onto you.
Okay, so we're getting good at spotting the projector. But what about ourselves? When are we most likely to project? Sapp says it's rarely when we're feeling calm and centered.
Right. It's usually when we're stressed, feeling inadequate, shamed, or usual defenses are down. It's the ego's panic button. Get this awful feeling away from me. Put it on someone else. Facing the truth feels too dangerous in that moment.
He lists situations that trigger this, like public criticism, loss of control, feeling envious, dealing with guilt, feeling vulnerable, even being reminded of past trauma.
Exactly. These all feel like threats to our ego, our self-worth. In those moments, projection is a quick, unconscious, but unhelpful escape, like tossing a hot potato to someone else.
He talks about different types of projection too, like inversion, what he calls the emotional flip.
That's a fun one. The accuser basically inverts the truth. So someone who's always late accuses you of being disorganized. Someone who interrupts constantly says you never let anyone speak. The accusation is a mirror image of their own behavior.
And then there's confession as accusation. Sounds like they're giving themselves away.
They do.
Yeah.
As they're accusing you, they accidentally reveal their own motives, sometimes their own actions. Like someone who's trying to manipulate the situation might say, you're trying to manipulate me. The more they confess within the accusation, the more intense and emotional it usually gets.
Moral masking, that's another one.
That's projection in disguise, dressed up as virtue. I'm only doing this because I care so much, they say, while controlling or being intrusive. It's this mask of moral outrage or excessive care, hiding less than admirable motives.
And what about preemptive projection?
That's more strategic. It's about getting ahead of something they're worried about. You're probably going to think I'm being unreasonable, they might say, before you've even said a word. It's like they're trying to preempt criticism.
And finally, collective projection. I guess that's more in groups.
Yeah, it's a way to dodge individual responsibility or to make the group feel more united by picking on an outsider. Everyone here thinks you're the problem, they might say, even if it's just their own feeling. They're making it the group's opinion, which gives it more weight and lets them off the hook for owning their own perspective.
Sapp also talks about how gender, culture, and context can all play a role in how projection shows up.
Right. The mechanism is universal, but the specifics, those can be shaped by things like social norms. So, men might be more likely to project vulnerability as weakness, while women who are assertive might face projections about being emotional or controlling. Culture matters too. In some cultures, projection might be more indirect, through gossip or passive aggression, while in others, it might be more direct and confrontational. And the environment matters too. Stressful situations, think tense meetings, family gatherings, or being cross-examined in court, those amplify the likelihood of projection.
He says projection really thrives in environments with a lot of shame.
Totally. When being wrong or making a mistake equals being a bad person, people learn to push those feelings away, project those flaws outward before they even realize it. It's a deeply ingrained survival tactic in those shame-heavy environments.
So we're getting good at recognizing this, but the big question is, what do we do when we see it happening? Sapp says calling someone out on their projection, it rarely works.
That's right. Projection is unconscious, so confronting it head-on usually just triggers their defenses. They deny, they counter-accuse, they dig in deeper. The goal isn't to confront or fix them, it's about navigating the situation and protecting yourself.
He talks about tactical disengagement and strategic listening. What are those about?
Tactical disengagement, it's like don't take the bait. When someone projects, resist the urge to defend, justify, or correct. Stay neutral. Let the projection sit with them. Sapp gives this example. Someone says you have control issues. You respond calmly with, that's an interesting perspective. Sometimes silence is the best answer. Strategic listening is about listening not to judge whether the accusation is true, but to hear the confession hidden within it, the feelings driving it. Pay attention to the intensity, the repetition, the specific details. Ask neutral questions that might help them see their own logic without making it personal. What makes you say that? Tell me more about that experience. How long have you been feeling this way about others? It's like you're holding up a mirror.
So listening to understand, not to agree or disagree. Sapp also says we can use projection to learn about someone's beliefs, their blind spots. How do we do that?
When someone projects the same traits or behaviors over and over, they're showing us what they're ashamed of, what they fear being seen as, what they generally believe about people, and often their own wounds. It's valuable information, not to be used against them, but to understand their triggers, how they see the world, how they handle conflict. It's a glimpse into their inner world, the parts they're trying to hide.
He talks about emotional judo, too, deflecting the projection without directly reacting.
Yeah, when someone projects, Sapp says you have three choices. Absorb it, and you might feel drained. Or start doubting yourself, not a good option. Confront it directly, and it might escalate, which isn't productive. Or redirect it, which is usually the most skillful approach. One technique is the mirror technique. You calmly reflect their language back. You're always finding fault, they say. You say, it sounds like you feel I'm often critical. Another is the displacement frame. You shift the focus to a general observation. I've noticed a lot of people are sensitive about their work, you might say, without addressing their specific accusation. And there's the preemptive neutralizer, where you frame your statement to anticipate their projection. This might be a bit tense, you might say, before diving into something potentially sensitive.
He also points out that sometimes redirecting isn't safe or appropriate. What do we do then?
In those cases, the most important thing is recognizing it for what it is. You say to yourself, this isn't mine. These feelings, these accusations, they don't belong to me. That recognition is like a shield, protecting you from taking it on. You don't have to engage, you don't have to prove anything, and you don't have to fix them. Just seeing it for what it is can be enough to stay grounded.
Sapp, with his legal background, dives deep into projection in legal contexts. What's it like in the courtroom during investigations?
It's really interesting. In law, projection isn't just a theory. It can be evidence. He calls it a confession with a costume change. Lawyers who can spot it, they gain an advantage.
What are the signs someone might be projecting during testimony or questioning?
Sapp lists a few. Denying something but being overly specific, too detailed. Using always and never a lot, which can mean they're building a rigid story to avoid slip-ups. Implanted motive is another one, where they assign a motive to someone that actually aligns with their own. And vague character attacks with no real examples. He also mentions the red flag combo. Strong emotions, sweeping statements, and assuming someone else's bad intentions that often means projection.
How can a lawyer use this in cross-examination?
Sapp says don't accuse them of projecting directly. That'll backfire. Instead, let them go on, encourage them to describe the other person's bad behavior in detail. Then, carefully, bring it back to their own actions, the facts of the case. It often exposes the inconsistencies, the parallels that reveal the projection, like someone accusing another of playing the victim when they're the ones acting like a victim. The key is to let them build their projection, then gently trip them up with the facts.
And prosecutors and investigators.
For them, spotting projection can reveal a lot. Internal conflicts, possible motives, feelings of guilt or shame. It helps them know where to dig deeper. And for prosecutors, showing a jury that a witness's accusations are really projections that can destroy their credibility. Even in plea deals, the way someone projects can show how involved they are, how willing they are to take responsibility.
Sapp talks about using this knowledge subtly to get information without being confrontational. Coaxing truth without a rope, he calls it.
Yeah, it's about setting the stage for someone to reveal things through their projections. He talks about subtle provocation, like the light judgment frame, where you offer a mild judgment about someone else, or a hypothetical that just happens to overlap with their potential guilt. Then you watch their reaction. Are they defensive, emotional? Do they deflect? Another is the disguised hypothetical. Ask about general opinions, how other people might act in certain situations, like what makes people hide money from their spouse. See how they respond. Are they smooth, rehearsed? Do they get emotionally invested? Then there's strategic overshare. You share something about yourself, maybe exaggerated or even made up, that reflects a trait you suspect in them. Watch how they react. Do they reassure, downplay, or try to one-up you?
He also talks about projective questions in this mirror room method.
Projective questions are those seemingly innocent questions designed to get revealing answers disguised as opinions, like, why do people cheat on their taxes? Or why do people lie about small things? Their answers tell you a lot about their attitudes, beliefs, maybe even their past. The mirror room method is more deliberate. You create this safe space, you offer prompts like, I wonder, or it seems like, and then you watch what they fill in. You can also echo some of their phrases back to them, gently encouraging them to reflect without leading them.
And the key to all of this, he says, is staying invisible while steering the conversation.
Exactly. It's about using open-ended questions, not getting stuck on details too early, letting the conversation flow naturally, mirroring their language without mirroring their opinions, acknowledging without validating, and using silence to your advantage. Often what they say after a pause is the most telling.
Finally, Sapp says projection isn't just about understanding the projector, it can also be like a crystal ball, predicting their future behavior.
Right. He says their accusations can be like telegrams from the unconscious, revealing their intentions, even plans. It's emotional leakage, he calls it. Our minds use our own experiences to understand others, so what we accuse others of often reflects what we're capable of ourselves.
So what are the signs that an accusation might be a prediction?
Accusations that seem to come out of nowhere, that aren't a response to anything you did, overly detailed, moralistic descriptions of someone's bad behavior, out of proportion reactions to small things, and repeating the same themes over and over.
But is it reliable, this prediction thing? Can we actually trust it?
Sapp says it's not perfect, but it can be a powerful tool, especially when you look at the context and four patterns. Someone projecting might be revealing something they've done, something they want to do, or something they're planning, especially if it's detailed and urgent. So projection can make certain behaviors more likely.
He also talks about probabilistic profiling and this reverse confession.
Probabilist.
Please visit my Amazon author page and learn more on the topics of law, hypnotism, and self-improvement. Thank you for joining us. Please like, subscribe, and share this video podcast. Also, go on over to Amazon and get a copy of my book. The link is in the description. Also, legalwritingusa.com.